You're watching Darker Than Darkness, and we're joined here today with
Sean Frasier of Wise Blood Records.
Right on. Ready for some questions?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. So I listened to the episode of A440 with you, and noticed that you touch on doom metal quite a bit, along with a lot of bands on your label are kind of in that death doom combination.
Yeah.
Or I was wondering, like, what's your history with the genre, and like what kind of grabs you to it?
Well, first of all, like with Wise Blood, I release every heavy genre pretty much. You know, all the stuff that I enjoy. And for me, doom, the first stuff that kind of grabbed me was Black Sabbath, which is like my favorite band of all time. But also I Hate God, which is probably the band I've seen live most of any other band. So I love both sort of avenues of doom. You know,
Okay.
I like the sort of like clean traditional stuff with like big riffs, but I also like the really gnarly, sludgy, swampy stuff. So I'm always looking for quality projects that encompass either or both of those. You know?
Moving from Indianapolis, moving to Indianapolis from New York.
Yeah.
Do you find that the scene is more closely knit, and has it helped your success in Wise Blood?
Yeah, so I'll be honest. Like when I moved to Indy, I wasn't really thrilled. You know, like I was like, oh, I'm leaving like a big city, a hub for music. And once I got here, I was like, man, there's a magic here. Like, you nailed it. There's like a close-knit community feel. And I've been really fortunate that I think without that, Wise Blood wouldn't have grown. Because, like, I had a very strong foundation from the start. And a lot of that is also because of Black Circle, which I am super fortunate to have in my backyard.
Right on. And how is that, like, collaborated with... you know, moving from New York, doing the decibel stuff, how does that like kind of compare? Is it a big shift for you, kind of moving into that?
Yeah, well, you know, I made a pit stop in Philadelphia, so like I've been going to slightly smaller cities like each time I've moved, and I will say New York and Philly would kill to have a venue like this that's dedicated to promoting heavy music. Philly does not have a venue of this quality. New York, St. Vitus just got shut down. So I think we're very fortunate to have a community this tight. And so I think in some ways it's been a positive for bands like Mother of Graves, Grave Ripper, some of the other excellent local bands that have sort of sprung out of this.
Right on. And how has this kind of the scene changed from the founding of Wise Blood? Even from like, maybe even drawing that back a little bit farther from your decibel work since 2013?
Well, I think there's more music than ever, you know, so it's really easy to find great new music across every genre. The tough part is promoting it, you know, like, how do you get people to hear your band out of 1,000 new albums that just came out? So that's always the tough part, but the health of the scene is fantastic. I've really seen a hardcore and like DIY punk scene in Indianapolis sort of blossom while Wise Blood has been going on. So I'm just really enthusiastic about the future, and it all starts with like all ages shows, you know, teenagers like getting into heavy stuff and keeping this music alive from the underground up.
And two, I think that like, so when we had our first episode with Ben from Mother of Graves, we touched on social media and how it's kind of a double-edged sword for some bands where it's you get lost in the sea or someone randomly kind of picks you up. In your experience, like, what kind of side of the scale have you seen like the most in indie?
So I think social media wise it helps. You know, I think especially when you're in a smaller scene that's not really nationally recognized. You know, Indiana's kind of considered a flyover state, right, to get to Chicago.
Yeah, crossroads of America.
Right, yeah, and we got Cleveland and Detroit, and then we got Chicago. But we're proving that not only can we pack a place on a Tuesday night, but we can have like all these excellent bands just spring out of India. I'll just say Indiana in general, but Indianapolis itself, like we had Demiricus, you know, we had Mother of Graves, Grave Ripper, Veilcast, Gates of Slumber, all these excellent bands, and I think those are like veterans in the scene, and it'll just keep getting younger and stronger. As those bands influence, you know, younger generations.
Yeah, I would completely agree. We like to touch on the younger generation a lot on the show, just because we're from that.
Yeah.
Me and the lovely lady behind the camera, of course. You put out a series called Faster Than the Devil. I believe 3 parts now, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about making more split album series, maybe focusing on other genres like doom, death, or even punk?
Yeah, so I do want to say I had an idea of I mentioned Veilcast in my last answer, and they're like probably the heaviest band I've released. And John from Veilcast suggested I do a split called "Slower Than the Gods," as a play off of "Faster Than the Devil." And I love that idea. It just hasn't happened. But the idea of having slower like doom or sludge bands or post metal or whatever is really enticing. The problem is the song lengths, are like more 5 or 6, so we don't really only have like 1 or 2 songs from each band. So it hasn't quite clicked yet, but I'm definitely open, because as like a broke teenager, like having splits and compilations was like a really great way for me to discover 4 or 5 bands at once. And I was like, I have no money, and I want to I'm hungry for new music.
You want to get as much much bang for your buck as possible.
Yeah,
especially.
I definitely run Wise Blood from the perspective of a broke teenager.
Yeah,
and like what I would want, like, and hopefully that resonates with people. And part of that is like we just released a sort of sampler for the year. Yeah. And it's like 20 tracks. It's totally free to download, because I think that's honestly that's better promotion than anything else you could do. Okay. It's like, hey, I'm making it super easy to find 20 new bands that maybe you didn't know, and hopefully 4 or 5 of them click with you.
Right on. So the past few times I've seen your distro, you've had bands from outside the country for sale. How do you get in contact with these small bands, and where do you like stumble across them?
So I'm just like a very hungry fan of extreme music. So I have a few labels overseas that I love. I like Dying Victims productions. Like pretty much everything they release is like Faster Than the Devil or like old school metal.
Super
sort of
thrashy, super high BPM stuff.
80s metal for sure.
Right on.
And then there's Pulverized Records, and they do some more extreme stuff. Ironbound Records in Indonesia. So I just kind of keep track of all these bands, all these labels overseas, and I trust their taste.
Because I remember I bought a Shrieking Demons album off of you guys, and that maybe had 50 monthly listeners even still. Yeah. And it was awesome. Like I was just kind of curious, like being a hungry like metal fan myself, just finding that and finding a way to stumble across that, and it's spreading like a disease. It's only surely going to grow. It's awesome.
Oh yeah, I just prowl on Bandcamp all the time. Shrieking Demons has a new album coming out like at the end of the month too.
Oh really?
And it's like they've had 2 or 3 tracks that I've just been listening to nonstop for 2 months. So that doesn't go away for me. Like the label can be stressful, but I'm still a fan first and foremost, and I'm just like still as eager as ever just to listen to new stuff.
And I know from your website that you used to occasionally take submissions from bands. What percentages of bands on your label would you say contacted you versus you contacted them?
I would say I was really fortunate. I had a lot of people reach out my first year, and that helped get me started. Vexing Hex was before even the label had a release. I was just an idea of a label, and they reached out. So I'd say at this point, it's about only a quarter of the time is it pitched to me. At this point, I kind of know what I want, and I have a lot of returning collaborators. But in the beginning, it was like very heavily submission based. Right on. And I'm lucky I don't have to do that quite as much anymore, because I have like a list of people that I want to work with, and I still go big. I still go big for like bands that say no, but I make them say no. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I'm still that like hungry for it. And
that kind of leads into a fun question I had for you. If you had to pick 3 bands to have on your label, who are we choosing? Like and it could be as big as possible.
That aren't on the label right now? Okay, so Dax Riggs, the singer of Acid Bath, he has an album coming out in January, and I asked him if I could release it on cassette, and he has said no so far, but I'm not going away. So Dax Riggs, if you see this, I'm coming after you with a very nice pitch. I'd say apart from that, Mortuary Drape from Italy has been a band I've really wanted, and I've pitched to them before also. So I would love to get there. I just love their approach to like witching metal, Right on. And the other one, probably Dope Throne. Yeah, the sludge band, French Canadian.
They did play here a couple weeks ago, didn't they?
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I didn't get to see them because their last 5 times I was supposed to see them, they didn't get into the country. And so I was like, they may not get in. I'm bartending. I'm glad they got in and that people saw them. But they're another band. I want to release something, even if it's just a cassette.
Yeah, right on.
I just love their sound.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm a big Dope Throne fan. I know I have coworkers too that are huge into like the Doom thing, and especially the Death Doom scene. So I know that that's also kind of like something you share in common.
Oh
with.
yeah, and they're just like degenerate sludge, and I just love it. It doesn't. Nobody does it better than them.
Yeah.
You know.
So last one for you. What does the process look like from having a finished song on your label to it being released through you?
Yeah, it takes a long time, and bands obviously they're creative, right? And they want people to hear their stuff, so they're ready for people to hear it now. And I'm always like, what if we pump the brakes and release it in 4 months? Like once there's vinyl on time. So it's a really long process of basically making sure all the artwork and layout and everything, the distribution set up. So I always send them a sort of like a timeline of what it would look like, and it takes a while. It's 4 months, you know.
Sorry.
No, you're okay.
I beloved see you, Jacob. That was the drummer of Grave Ripper.
Right on.
Saying hello. But yeah, it's a really long time, and I routinely have to slow people down because we want to release it right. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's a lot of moving parts, but
Do you think it's kind of like a roadblock you bump into when someone's wanting it like now, and it might not be the best for promotional reasons or for product reasons, and they kind of like dry up that attention after a while?
for sure, yeah, I think you definitely, if you release stuff too fast or without maybe the care promotionally, it can hurt, you know. And a great song deserves to be heard, you know. So I'm always like, let's just slow it down and let's get this in front of people.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not right for the artist, and that's okay. It's like artist first, wherever they want. But most of the people I work with, they see why. Like I would say, hey, the song that's ready right now, let's release it in March. You know.
And just it's one that came to mind from your experience being like all over mostly the east side of the country and just kind of like experiencing different scenes and different venues, tons of different bands. Do you think that indie has a sound that's different from what we'd say like is East Coast thrash or like Norwegian black metal? Do you think we kind of have something a little special?
You know what? Nothing really clicks because like all the people that are part of our creative, community here, they all have their own inspiration, and they have their own influences. So I haven't really found a connective tissue other than there's kind of a little brother syndrome where I think some of the bands don't go out as hard as they can right away. They're like, oh, maybe there's like an imposter syndrome from being like from a smaller state or whatever. So that's the only thing I've run into. So part of my job, right, is being like, you're awesome and let's get that confidence up and get you going after it. Because, they deserve it. They deserve for their music to be heard.
And is there anything you wanted to promote for the show?
Yeah, so I'd say I have that 20-track sampler that just came out. We have lots of awesome music coming out for the community. We got new music from Grave Ripper coming this year, Veilcast, Bloodletter, Vile Iniquity, oh my god, I don't want to miss anybody, Lavaborn, Cursed Blade. All this stuff is coming out this year.
Okay.
So we're really lucky to have these like fantastic artists in our midst.
I would agree. Vile Iniquity was great when I seen them. Flurm's always been great the multiple times I've seen them.
Oh, yeah.
But they aren't on the record, the label anymore.
And that doesn't even matter. Like, I honestly, part of like, I feel like my job is just like, kind of like being a radar signal, and like putting out the stuff.
And their first EP that you put out is like one of my favorite releases from you guys. It was one of my first introductions to the scene. So hearing all of those, Lavaborn, Vile Iniquity this year, I'm very excited for 2025, Wise Blood.
Oh yeah. And Crossfire, which you mentioned to me earlier.
Right on.
That just came out too.
Yeah, and it's great.
Great year for indie music.
Right on. I appreciate you for your time, and thank you so much.
Absolutely, man. Thank you.
Yeah.